Hello, and welcome to The Good Life, what it is and how to achieve it. I'm your host, Michael Parkman. And before we begin, I want to thank all of our YouTube and Facebook viewers and invite you to like and subscribe where appropriate to help our program continue on a weekly basis. But for now, let's get into today's topic. Today's topic is pleasure and pain and understanding the relationship of these two terms to living the good life. Now, for our purposes today, pleasure is defined as obtaining the object of your desire and avoiding things that you are averse to. Now, most of us would agree that we spend the majority of our lives seeking to obtain pleasure. I want this object, I want that object, I want this person, I want that person. All of these things, the obtaining of these things, give us a euphoric sense of joy. I satisfied my desire for something. On the other side of the coin, I avoided this, I avoided that, I don't want this. And so by not getting what you don't want, that gives you a sense of pleasure as well. Now, part of our discussion today centers around short-term pleasure, long-term pleasure, short-term pain, and long-term pain. Now, all of these intermesh together. We have to understand that all of these things work together. In the Bible, in Matthew 16:24, Jesus said, if anyone wishes to follow him, they must first deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow him. Now, the key words there, two words, deny themselves. Now, with our definition of pleasure, it is a little bit contradictory to deny yourself. But what Jesus is saying in that moment is that there is a short-term pleasure and there is a long-term pain. There is a short-term pain and a long-term pleasure. For example, Jesus went to the cross and died. Being God in the flesh, he could have stopped this process at any time he chose to do so. But he chose to do his saving work on the cross. Short-term pain for the long-term benefit, pleasure of providing a way of salvation for us. Now we need to take that down to a more earthly level to kind of so you can relate to something in your life that exemplifies what we're talking about. As a child, your mother's doing some baked goods, some cookies, and making it for the bake sale or maybe for the church or some particular event. She has to go away for a minute, and she tells you, do not touch those cookies. Leave them alone. They're for a particular reason. She goes away. She's not around. You really want those cookies. You have a desire because they look so good and they smell good. And so you decide to take one. And you try to rearrange them so it looks like they're not missing. That one's not missing. Your mother comes back. She notices that the cookie is missing. She notices the crumbs from the cookie you ate. And she asks you a question. Did you take a cookie? You answer no. She already knows you did. So now, you get a whooping. You get punishment. So, that short-term pleasure of eating that cookie, that long-term pain, punishment, is now in effect. The consequences of your action. So now the eating of that cookie is a distant memory compared to the pain you're now suffering as a result of that action. But when you were choosing to take that cookie, you didn't consider the consequences of getting caught. The consequences were not considered until you got caught. Then you tell that lie, no, I didn't. So you compound error with another error. My point being is that you have to weigh the cost of anything that you do and or say with the benefits of saying it. If the cost is too high, if it outweighs the benefit, you shouldn't do it or say it. And the reverse is true. If the benefits of what you do or say outweighs the cost, then that's the direction you should go. But the only way to make those decisions is to step into that gap we talked about a couple of weeks ago and look at a situation objectively and say, what's going on here? Not only what's going on outside of me, but what are my internal feelings about what's going on? And once I get those things under control, then I have the ability to make a rational decision. And then once you make that decision, the other thing comes into play, taking responsibility. We've all been in situations where someone has said or done something and we've taken offense to it. Now I'm going to start this by saying, first of all, if someone says something to you and you take offense to it, the harm does not come from the person that said something. The harm comes from your opinion of what they said. You have a choice to decide to be harmed or decide not to be harmed. You don't believe me? Let's go back to what we used to say as kids. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. That wisdom of children comes into play here. If someone says something, regardless of their intention, if they said it with their intent of hurting you, if it's negative, your very first thought should be, is what they're saying true? If it is true, your very first response should be, let me correct that in myself so that it can never be said to be true again. If what they said is not true, then you can let that go right past you. Because if you know that you're doing the right thing for the right reason at the right time, and you're in the right spot, then an untrue statement has no effect on you. Unless, of course, you choose to let it. So you can choose not to let that untrue statement bother you. Now, the hard part is your peer group, the masses around you who are cheering you on to take whatever response that they think you should take. Oh, if that was me, I would have, or you ought to do something, or you weak, you let them say that, you let them do that. I understand that, and that's very difficult for a young person. It's actually difficult for everybody because we put too much stock into what other people say and not enough stock in our own self and what we think. We claim to love ourselves more than anything else, but we give our mind to any passerby that comes along because we're concerned about appearances. Well, guess what? All of those masses that are telling you to do something, they will not be there when the consequences come. The first thing you will hear is, I didn't make them do it. So they're not taking responsibility for their part in it. Who does the responsibility go to? You. The consequences go to you. So therefore, it makes great sense for you to take responsibility for yourself, endure the short-term pain of the jeers and sneers of your peer group because you didn't act in a manner in which they thought you should act, and you act in your own best interest. Because in today's society, it's very violent. And you deciding to react angrily at the behest of the crowd, or just unleash your anger because that initial impression that you got was, oh, this makes me so mad. It could end up in you or someone else losing their lives. Look at the news. Every day you see someone being killed as a result of violence because someone's anger is out of control. Someone's emotions are out of control. Someone is out of their right mind and they act. And the consequences don't come into play until after it's too late. You have to think about what you do before you do it. What's the cost? What's the benefit? If you're in an argument and you decide to pick up a weapon and use it, the short-term benefit, the short-term pleasure is you've inflicted harm upon an adversary. But the cost could be 10 years, 20 years, or life in prison. Who benefits? Who suffers? If you take someone's life, that person is gone. Their family suffers. You go to prison for life, your family suffers. All because of a silly argument that could have been avoided had you chosen not to be harmed by what someone said. The object here is to live in order to grow and become the person that you want to be. But if you surrender your life for something foolish, then you have no one to blame but yourself because you have a choice. You always have a choice. You may not necessarily like the choices, but you have a choice. And sometimes you have to deal with the short-term pain to deal with the long-term pleasure. Short-term pain in this instance is the jeers and sneers of your friends. The long-term pleasure is that you live. Think about it. It is important to live because in living you have the opportunity to change your life. If your life ends, it's over. No opportunity to change. It's done. It is imperative that you live. So every perceived slight, and I use the word perceived because you decide whether something is harmful to you or hurtful to you. And once you make that decision, then you have another decision to make. How do you respond to that perceived hurt? If you take away the perception of hurt, then there is no hurt. Then you don't have to decide how to respond. Please remember one thing, that you do nothing, do absolutely nothing without a purpose in mind. If someone says or does something and you feel the need to correct them, then do so with just that in mind. Not to get them told, but to improve them. Also understanding that they may not be willing to accept what you have to say. And if that be the case, then you have the option of turning away from the situation. There may be another time later, somewhere in their life, where they may understand what you tried to say at that moment. But the key is that you get to walk away and live instead of having an argument and trying to be more boastful or more forceful than that person. Because when the egos get involved, trouble follows shortly thereafter. So anything that you say or do, there needs to be a legitimate purpose behind it, and the purpose cannot and should not be just to get something off your chest. If your purpose is to help somebody, then approach them in a helpful manner. That is important, because we want you to live, to become the person that you were meant to become. Now I'm going to talk to the school-age viewers. We're going to talk about short-term pleasure versus long-term pain. You have homework to do. You're at home, you spend all day at school, you finally get a chance to sit with your phone or your Xbox or your TV, and you're enjoying yourself. You're having a great time. But you know you got homework to do. But you'd rather do what you're doing. You'd rather play than do your homework. So you make that decision. That's short-term pleasure. I'm doing what I want to do, which is play the game. Tomorrow, when you go to school and you don't have your homework, begins the process of long-term pain. Your grades suffer. And when your report card comes out and your parents notice that your grades have suffered, and they look and they see the list of homework assignments you haven't turned in, your phone goes away, Xbox goes away, your TV privileges go away. And when I was a kid, when you had a bad grading period, you had to wait 6 weeks to get the results to improve your grades in order for your privileges to be restored. Short-term pleasure, playing the game, versus long-term pain, loss of privileges. 6 weeks or 8 weeks, or however long your grading period is, of misery for that extra hour or two per day that you played the game instead of doing your homework. Now, the opposite, you can take the short-term pain. Yeah, I don't want to do the homework, but I'm going to do it. So yeah, you're bearing that cross of having to do your homework, but you do it, you get it done, you turn it in. Your grades show it. You have the peace of mind of not worrying about how long will it be before my parents find out I didn't do something that I should have done. So that long-term pleasure is that peace of mind. The even longer-term pleasure is that you learn what you should learn to improve yourself. You have to understand short-term pain and long-term pleasure, and short-time pleasure and long-term pain. During the pandemic, many of us gained weight because we were indoors, we couldn't go to the gym, we couldn't do a lot of things we just felt unsafe doing the things that we normally would do. So you've decided at some point that I need to do better. I need to get back in shape. I need to lose weight. I need to become more active. Now you're sitting somewhere and the banana split is presented to you and it looks so good. That dessert looks so wonderful. And that extra sandwich or that second helping looks so good because it tastes so good. That short-term pleasure. The long-term pain is you overeat, you overindulge, you gain weight or you don't lose weight, and you have possible negative health effects. Now, you can look at it as the short-term pain. I can avoid the banana split and the extra plate, or I can exercise moderation and eat less of both. Short-term pain. I can exercise. Short-term pain. But the benefit, the long-term pleasure, better health, weight loss. There's always a cost-benefit analysis that you have to make with every decision that you make. And the ability to step out of a situation, look at it objectively, and figure out what's going on inside me, what's going on outside of me, those relationships. And if you can do that, then you have the ability to make a rational decision about your response. And then with that, you also have to take responsibility. When you choose to do something, it can't be because they said so. It's because you chose to. So be man or woman enough to say to yourself, I made this choice. It's no one else's fault. You may have made the choice and you may have thought it was the right choice, but sometimes you don't have enough information or something happens unexpectedly and it doesn't turn out the way you thought. Instead of blaming it in everybody about what happened, look to yourself and go, you know what? What can I do that this doesn't happen in the future? If I need to do a little more research or seek out a mentor or somebody I can talk to about a situation, then maybe that's what I should do before I make a decision. It is imperative that we learn to look at situations and events in the cold light of day, in the moment, in the now, regardless of the emotional impact that it initially has, and say, what's really going on here? Because that choice at that time could save your life. In living the good life is more than just the obtaining of things, gadgets, whatever it is that you decide that you like. Living the good life is more than that. Living a good life comes from within you, living with virtue and honor and respect for yourself. On the subject of respect, I've spoken many times about respect is earned, not given. But you have to respect yourself. You have to love yourself enough to be mindful of the things you let in your mind, the things that you put in your body, the attitudes that you accept. You have to make those decisions to respect yourself so that you stay in the right frame of mind in order for you to prosper. Don't give headspace to everything that comes your way. Things are going to pop into your mind. You can't help that. But you do have the choice of how long you let something stay there. We want you to think. We want you to think correctly. Because in the Bible it says, as a man thinketh, so is he. So if you're thinking correctly, you're going to be correct. If you're thinking incorrectly, you are going to be incorrect. So as a man thinketh, so is he. We want you to live. We want you to think correctly, and we want you to survive. And we want you to live the good life.